Hey everybody, welcome back to the Relentless Sportsman channel. I'm going to share with you two really great strategies for hunting the rut. And if you're new to this channel, my name is Corey and I'm really glad you're here. The Relentless Sportsman channel is all about educating and teaching people how to simplify their experiences, everything hunting and fishing. We often hear about the rut as the most popular time that people get in the woods for bow hunting white-tailed deer. And that's true. You'll see more trucks at public parking lots, you'll see more trucks parked along the road, and you'll see more people out in the woods at that time of year than all throughout the season, bow hunting specifically. And there's a pretty good reason for that. Obviously the rut is when bucks are chasing does around because they really want to breed. They're high in testosterone and they're active more times of the day, not just so much in the morning, not just so much in the evening, but also throughout the day, like at noon when the sun is up and normally when they're not actually that active to begin with. One thing I can't teach you is when the rut's going to begin in your area. Because where I live in Wisconsin, the rut is pretty good starting in the 1st November all the way through maybe the middle of the month. I've even seen it pick up around the 20th of October where I live in central Wisconsin, and I tell people that and they're often surprised, but I think it's kind of the beginning of the pre-rut phase. Personally, my favorite time to hunt is the pre-rut. This is where I find the most buck activity. Not so much with scrapes and rubs, you'll see all of that, but what I see is bucks moving constantly back and forth between doe bedding areas, searching for does, and they're extremely active, putting on miles and miles a day, going outside of their normal home range, searching for these does. I don't know when your pre-rut begins, but whenever that begins in that state, in your area, that's when you should be out in the woods implementing these two strategies I'm about to share with you. So let's get to it with strategy number 1. I promise this is going to help you, it's going to make you a better hunter, and you're going to see more deer if you put in the time. So strategy number 1 is find and hunt in bottlenecks. Bottlenecks are areas in the woods or on the property that you're hunting that force the deer into a smaller area geographically. Instead of them having a massive area that they can travel through, natural circumstances forces them to a narrowed section of the woods or whatever property you happen to be on, and it forces them to go through this area so that they can get to the other area where they're trying to go. Now there are a ton of different examples of a bottleneck. Bottlenecks can be found in all different hunting terrains. It doesn't matter how big they are or how small they are. They come in different sizes, shapes. They can be up in the hills, they can be down in the lowlands and swamps. But a really great way to find a bottleneck is search for water, because the water is going to help shape that terrain and really funnel these deer into a smaller geographical area. One of the best examples of a bottleneck is a peninsula. And here we have a small river that curves around this peninsula. In other words, the peninsula extends back here from my left out this way, and it really narrows out at this section right here before the deer cross to get to their destination on the other side of the river. If you look at the end of peninsulas, oftentimes you're going to see tracks on the end of there because that's a place where deer can go through where they feel safe. In other words, they're not going to walk the edge of it out that way. If it's a wide peninsula, they're not going to walk the other edge because they're exposed because they've got water on one side. They're going to tend to stay a little bit more toward the middle where it's thicker cover. They're going to walk across up to the end of the peninsula, cross to the other side. Now they might not cross at the point of the peninsula because oftentimes there's deep water on bends. They might go on the corner of one of the sides. But either way, this is a great example of a bottleneck because they don't want to cross the river over there to get to the other side because they're exposed. They don't want to cross the river here because it's deep and they're exposed. They want to stay in the woods as long as they can before they need to cross for whatever reason that they might be crossing. Another example of a bottleneck is actually more of like an hourglass figure. Now it's not going to be perfect. When we think of an hourglass, we think of symmetrical top, symmetrical bottom. In the middle is where it narrows down that the sand goes through. But you can find hourglass figures if you look on Onyx or Google Maps where you hunt. Sometimes it's not perfectly like an hourglass, actually most of the time it's not. But if you're looking for sections of land where there's thick cover, it gets real narrow, maybe with fields on either side, and it goes into other thick cover, that's a place where you should be hunting. You can easily set up on those smaller areas in the hourglass, that narrow part in the middle, because that's where deer are going to funnel to, and this bottleneck. Sometimes bottlenecks can be difficult to identify on aerial maps. You might have to get the boots on the ground and go out and explore yourself. I've seen a lot of bottlenecks simply just by working my way through deer bedding areas. You go to the thickest part on that parcel and you start following the edge of it. You're going to see beds, you're going to see a lot of scat, you're probably going to see rubs if it's fall, but what you're also going to notice is eventually that bedding area stops. And usually bedding areas are not perfect squares. And since they're not perfect squares, they're eventually going to taper off in some spot. You're not going to find bedding areas most of the time that are perfectly circle or a perfect rectangle. They're going to have a point in the bedding area, literally a point like a triangle or something, where deer are going to funnel to most likely. Now, if deer are moving from that bedding area to another bedding area transition spot, that's a different story. But oftentimes you're going to find bedding areas taper off to the end, and that's a good spot to set up as well because it keeps them contained in a smaller geographical area. Speaking of bedding areas, that brings me to strategy number 2. Hunt downwind of doe bedding areas. And it's a lot easier than you think. Check this out. Obviously, the first thing you need to do is locate an actual doe bedding area. That's really simple to do. You look for the thickest area on the property you're hunting that's adjacent to some type of food source. That's really it. And as you walk through there, you should probably see different types of scat, meaning it's does and fawns. And what you should really see in certain areas are beds kind of in a circle. They're not always in a circle, but multiple beds in one area. If you find just one bed, it's on the edge where it can overlook something, that's probably a buck bed. If you find beds, multiple beds within like 30-foot radius, and you see different size shapes, and you can tell that there's different size scat, that's a doe bedding area. Now, bucks will bed in there too, but that's for sure where a lot of does like to hang out while they're bedding. I have a perfect example for strategy number 2, showing you not only how to locate doe bedding, but also how to set up downwind of doe bedding. I'm going to use an aerial map to show you exactly how I would set up for doe bedding in the rut right now. Alright, so as you can see in this example, down in the southeast corner of this particular hunting parcel, it's really thick tag alders, which means there's good doe bedding because there's good protection. Just north of this bedding area, it's going to appear to be kind of like a food plot, because it basically is. It's a natural food plot that's been cut over many years ago, and it's grown up to the perfect height where deer can feed there. Now, since the doe bedding area is south of where they're feeding, the perfect place to set up is in between. Because if you have some kind of south wind, which we often get, especially this time of year, it seems to be north or it seems to be south, you're going to want to set up right in that area because bucks are going to cruise in between where the does feed and where the does bed. They're scent checking. As they go across left to right or east to west in this particular situation, the does are going to be giving off scent, and you want to make sure you're downwind of that particular doe bedding area, in between where the bucks would be cruising and where the does would be bedding. If you run these transition lines and you play the wind accordingly, this is going to really get you in a position to shoot a nice buck this coming rut. Now, don't get me wrong, there are many other ways you can set up for the rut, but if I only had a day or two to hunt, or maybe just a week like some people do, some people take a week off for the rut each year, that's fine. But if I only had a few days to hunt and I wanted to shoot a buck, these would be the 2 strategies I would implement 100%. You can find bucks other ways. You can do your best to find them using other strategies that I'm sure you're aware of. But if you only have limited amount of time and you want to get good use of your time and make sure that you have a high percentage chance of shooting a deer this season, I would implement these 2 strategies almost every day if you can. Now, when you're hunting the rut, there are different times that work depending on the wind, depending on the temperature, depending on what's going on. So I'm not talking about when you should be sitting in your tree stand or when you should go out in the morning or when you should head back for lunch or whatever. I'm just talking about how you should set up to hunt the rut most effectively so you're not wasting your time out there. You don't need to be out in the middle of a woodlot wasting your time praying to God that you see something, because it's a good chance you won't. You really want to use your time wisely, get in those high percentage areas, get in those bottleneck situations. Now, I know there's some guys that say, you're not going to see a lot of deer in bottleneck, it's just a lot of small bucks and small does. Maybe, you don't know, but at least you're seeing something. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they're wrong or they're right. This is just my opinion. I have enough proof on my own property where I've seen nice quality bucks using these bottlenecks when they travel through looking for does. Enough experience to share that with you. So I think it's worth a shot if you're not really sure what to do this year for the rut. And I also know for a fact that when you're looking at doe bedding areas and you're looking for bucks and you're looking for buck sign around these bedding areas, you always find it on the edge of the doe bedding area because bucks are cruising, leaving their scent, putting down scrapes, rubbing trees, usually adjacent to doe bedding. It happens all the time. Might not be in a perfectly straight line, but it's usually in that area where they're cruising looking for does during the rut. And now, if it's just before the rut, now is your time to really think and strategize where you're going to go depending on the wind. Which bottleneck are you going to set up in? Are you going to set on the north side or the south side? What's the wind direction this weekend? What's it going to be the next weekend? Start planning ahead, figuring out these spots, saying, maybe Saturday I'm going to hunt here. Sunday morning I'm going to go to this location. Sunday evening maybe I should go to that location because the wind shifts. It's just a really good way to get going and to figure out your strategy before you get in the woods and you realize you made a mistake and you just wasted a complete sit, being in the wrong spot to begin with. And that's all I've got for you guys on this episode of The Relentless Sportsman. Once again, my name is Corey Meyer. I'm here to help you become a better fisherman and a better hunter by using simple, practical methods that increase your quality of hunting and fishing every time you go out there. If you haven't yet, please subscribe down below. It helps the channel grow. I really appreciate it. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.